Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Cancer Fairy here. Today we're going to be doing a slightly different video in honor of Pokemon Sun and Moon, which is going to be coming out in just a few hours in some regions and a couple of days here in the UK. We are going to be looking at some of the new Pokemon and we're going to try and come up with some potential sets for them. Hopefully throw in a few Cancer Fairy sets, but in the meantime we're just going to be assessing them. So, starting of course with the Grass Starter. Oh yeah, we are going to be looking at mostly fully evolved Pokemon, not Little Cup. We're looking at some NFVs to see if they're really good. But we're starting, of course, with Decidueye. The first thing that strikes you about this thing is its sort of versatility, I would say. Stats kind of reflect that, except for its bad defense and speed, so it's not going to be running any like physically defensive sets. But if you notice, it does have the same defensive typing as Gourgeist, which is definitely very useful. And it's kind of like a specially defensive Gourgeist in that respect, and it does have a very good support move pool. It doesn't have Will-O-Wisp or Leech Seed, but what it does have Roost, it does have Feather Dance to act as a pseudo Will-O-Wisp. It has Defog and Haze as egg moves, which are of course extremely useful, and it's got U-turn to pivot in and out, so that definitely gives it some niche as a support Pokemon. If you want to go the offensive route, then, well, Scarf isn't really going to be that good because it's not very powerful. But, well, I don't know, it's up to you, of course. If you want to go a physically offensive set, you do have Swords Dance with Leaf Blade, Acrobatics and Brave Bird, Sucker Punch, which makes up for this thing's got a mediocre speed, and Spirit Shackle, which is this thing's, oh, we just missed it, which is this thing's new signature move. It's a 80 base power ghost type move and acts like 1,000 waves that it traps opponents. So it's kind of like a mean look that does damage, essentially. So here we are. The user attacks while simultaneously stitching the target's shadow to the ground to prevent the target from escaping. Well, at least it's more powerful than Shadowclaw. The trapping thing is kind of not terribly helpful, but we shall see what people come up for it. As for the offensive prowess, that's pretty good. Anyway, Leaf Blade and Spirit Shackle dual, well, 90 and 80 power stabs respectively. Brave Bird, of course, is excellent for opposing grass types. We've also got Long Reach, which means that none of its offensive moves are contact moves, which is very, very useful, especially if you're playing in OU. It means you could avoid, Rocky Helmet, Garchomp, and all that. You could avoid triggering Aftermath and other things. Spiky Shield and Baneful Bunker, which is a new Spiky Shield type move, which we'll come on to later. And of course, this thing's also got 100 base attacks, and it gets access to Nasty Plot, so a specially offensive set is also somewhat considerable, with Energy Ball, Shadow Ball, and Hidden Power, which is unfortunately all it gets. But it's certainly worth a try. You could run like a bulky special offensive set with, Roost. And, Feather Dance is probably an option. So Roost, Feather Dance, Nasty Plot, and I don't know. Well, maybe not. Your coverage is a bit shit. But whether you choose to run Swords Dance or Nasty Plot, you've always got the option to Baton Pass these boosts. Or just haze them away, I don't fucking know. So, that's Decidueye, a Pokemon which is extremely useful. Not the most extensive move pool ever, but it certainly does give it some very valuable utility, in Cancer Fairy's humble opinion. Next up, of course, is Incineroar, everybody's beloved fire dark type, which loses to 3 out of the 6 other starters because it's weak to fighting. So that's a promising start already. But Fire Dark is obviously a very strong offensive typing, and it really has the move pool to back it up with Crunch, Flail Blitz, EQ, Cross Chop or Brick Break, Throat Chop, which is a 80 base power dark type move, which makes the opponents unable to use sound based moves for 3 turns. Focus Miss, Bulk Up, Swords Dance, Nasty Plot, Willow, and some support moves such as Will-O-Wisp, Flame Charge, Taunt, U-Turn, and even Fake Out. Now, it has got pretty good bulk, the type, and it has Intimidate as well to back up the physical defense. That typing is pretty damn atrocious for that thing, so I don't think that's really the way to go. You can run an Assault Vest or something if you want to take some hits, but I think offensive is the way to go. And of course, as I just mentioned, it certainly has the ability to do that. I think Scarf is going to be pretty good on this thing. You got, even though the speed is a bit shit, with Intimidate you can come in, sponge a hit, just hit something with a Flare Blitz, a Crunch, or instead of Crunch you've even got the option to run, as I said, what is it? Throat's Chop, which is coming up in just a second. Come on. There it is. 80 base power 100. User attacks the target's throat, and the resultant suffering prevents the target from using moves that emit sound for 2 turns. My mistake. So this thing basically fucks over Sylveon, which is great. Which is actually, you know, something to consider. If the opponent tries to switch into Sylveon to take a dark type attack, they'll find themselves completely fucking walled. And in addition to that, you have Darkest Lariats. The user swings both arms and hits the target. The target's stat changes don't affect this attack's damage. So it's basically a dark type Sacred Sword, which is kind of mediocre. I prefer moves with like a secondary effect or something over moves that just ignore defense boosts. But it has its uses. And there you go. So where were we? Yeah, Scarf set with Flare Blitz, Crunch, Throat's Chop, or Darkest Lariat. In addition to that, you've got Earthquake, Cross Chop, or Brick Break if you don't want to miss. And U-turn as well to pivot, so that's great. And you can even run a spec set, even so inclined, with Fire Blast, Dank Pulse, but then that's about it. You got U-turn and Grass, I don't know. And in addition to that glorious offensive move ball, as I said, it also gets Bulk Up, SD, Nasty Plot. So, you know, either of those with 3 attacks is also going to be very potent, giving this thing's good bulk. Excellent defensive stats. Well, mediocre attack, I suppose, but with Nasty Plot, that doesn't really matter. One potential set Canterbury had in mind was a Bulk Up Flame Charge set. So, Bulk Up, Flame Charge, Crunch, and Flare Blitz. Or, instead of Flare Blitz, since you got, you know, Flame Charge, you might want to run EQ or something, but that's a bit shit. So, there we go. And there is also the potential of like a lead stall breaking type thing. Because it does get Fake Out, it gets Taunt, it gets Will-O-Wisp, U-Turn. So, some good potential there, and obviously Intimidate does give it actually deceptively good physical defense, even with that awful typing. So that is good. Lots of potential here for this thing. And finally, of course, we have our Water type starter, Primarina. Obviously, the things that stick out are those excellent special stats, and that amazing typing, the same typing as Marrow. We all know how good that is. Unfortunately, instead of Sap Sipper, this thing gets an ability of questionable utility in Liquid Voice, which turns all sound-based moves into Water-type moves, which is kind of like an inferior Pixelate, because it doesn't boost them, it just makes them Water-type. And even then, everybody's going to be using Scald, so that's pointless. Just run Torrent. In addition to, you know, Scald and Hyper Voice, there's Hydro Pump, and yes, this thing's signature move, which I don't think anybody's ever going to use. Sparkling Area, which cures burns, so reverse Scald. That's got to be the most useless move in all of competitive. Anyway, this thing does not get any boosting moves, except for Work Up. So, just slap a Specs on this thing, or, I don't know, an AV or something. I don't think that's the way to go. You just run like Hydro Pump, Moonblast, it gets Energy Ball, which is good, and Nice Meme. And that's about it. So yeah, and it's obviously going to be pretty damn powerful, off of base 126 attack. Which is, you know, that's almost Keldeo there. So I think this thing is going to be quite the powerhouse. And it could also run a support set. Like I said, it's got pretty good special defense. Even though that defense isn't good, it does have an amazing typing. It resists, what, fighting, dark, water, ice, fire. It's immune to dragon. So there's a lot of potential there. I mean, if you've seen Canterbury use Marrow, you know what that typing's all about. So the support moveset just includes moves like Light Screen, Reflect, Encore, Misty Terrain if you want. And that's about all there is to say about it. It also gets Aquajet if you want to run some Down Syndrome banded set. I don't know. That's probably what Canterbury is going to try at some point. Why the hell not, right? Next up, of course, this is something we've never seen in Pokemon before. A Pokemon based on some shit bird. Amazing. Yeah, no, it's probably the worst bird yet, besides like Noctowl or something. At least, you know, like Swellow has Guts and Boomburst, Pidgeot has Omega, and Fearow has coverage and good speed. This just has nothing. It does have very good attack, but doesn't really have much of a move pool to make use of that. You got Brave Bird, Return. You don't get any fighting coverage, mind you, except for Brick Break, which is obviously terrible. But you do get a boosting move in Swords Dance, so that's something. So, again, it's move pool. You got Brave Bird, you got Rock Blast, you got Bullet Seed and Fury Attack. those last 3 to make use of Skill Link. It doesn't have anything to make use of Sheer Force, except for like Flame Charge and Rock Smash, which are both pitifully weak. And there's also its signature move, which we just missed. Just a second. I can't be asked to go back. It's called Beak Blast. It is, what is it, 100 base power. And what it does is a charging move like Focus, not Focus Mace. Focus, there it is. You use the first to heat up its beak, and then it attacks the target. So my understanding is this is a charge move like Focus Punch, except if you get hit, it's not that it doesn't cancel the attack. Instead, whatever hit you gets burned. So while this is kind of useless as an offensive move, you just want to run Brave Bird. What this does have is some potential as a sort of Destiny Bond type thing. Well, not even like a Destiny Bond thing, because you don't necessarily need to die for it to activate. What it can do is it can deter things from attacking you unless they get burned by Beak Blast. And if they don't attack you, if they go for like a status move, or if they switch out, whatever switches, or whatever that target, or whatever switches in, just gets hit by a 100 base power move off of a 120 base attack. So it's not really good for like sweeping or anything like that. But it does have very strong potential. There's something to put on tremendous pressure to the opponent. Attack, get burned, don't attack, get hit. Wait, hang on. I don't know if it actually cancels the attack either. Okay, yeah, so if you hit this thing, you get burned, and the attack goes through, as far as I can tell. But besides that, though, it doesn't really get anything. Does it get anything to boost its speed besides Tailwind? And you got, I don't know, so if you want to like Swords Dance, Tailwind, Brave Bird, Brick Break or something, I don't know. But it doesn't really have the speed for that. You can try running Scarf, you can try running Bandit. Yes, I don't know, this thing is terrible. Next, I'm not sure why, but I get a strong sense that this Pokemon wants to build a wall. Huh, interesting. So, Gumshoes, of course, a thing you are all looking forward to since that trailer like 6 months ago, is in fact terrible, as you'd expect. It's basically the Raticate of this generation, no surprises there. Its stats are terrible, except for that pretty good attack stat. And this thing does actually have some very good abilities to make use of said attack stat. So, well, I say that. It doesn't really have the move pool is a bit awkward actually. So if you want to run Strong Jaw, for example, you get Crunch and Hyper Fang, and that's it. Doesn't get the Elemental Fangs, which would be useful. Oh well. But you do get, Crunch, Hyper Fang, EQ. Doesn't get any fighting coverage, mind you. But those 3 by themselves are pretty good coverage. Anyway, you've even got U-Turn, I don't know, a slow U-Turn, mind you, and Pursuit, and Pursuit is interesting because it works, oh sorry, I missed that. You do have fighting coverage, it's Revenge, which is terrible. Yeah, Pursuit does not synergize very well with Stakeout, which is this thing's new signature ability, if you like. How this works, if I'm not mistaken, is if something switches in trying to absorb an attack from this thing, it takes double damage, which is actually really, really threatening. If you slap a Choice Band on this thing, you got 525 attack, double that, you get, what? Something like +2 Marowak type attack. It's ridiculous. So yeah, that's something to look forward to. So the choice really comes down to Stakeout or Strong Jaw. Adaptability you've also got, but I don't really think it's that useful. You got Return and Frustration, of course. But Strong Jaw boosts Crunch as well. So I think that's the way to go. And I think Hyper Fang is a chance to flinch. So if you get something really slow, then there's a chance there. But ultimately, it's slow, it's frail, and it's going to make Alola great again. Oh, here we go. An NFE. Now, the reason I'm looking at this is because Ken Spray plays PU a lot, and there are obviously lots of NFEs in PU. And this is something which I think could actually be quite useful in that tier. It has a good defensive typing, and it does have good bulk with the Violites. Like Electric might seem kind of mediocre, but if you think about it, it's only got weaknesses to Rock and Fire. Well, it's also got resistances to Electric, Steel, Fire, and Grass, and it's neutral to Ground, for example. I do think there genuinely is some potential there. It doesn't actually get, anything like Sticky Web, for example, but I mean, it does have enough of a support move in like Discharge, Light Screen, Rain Dance, Volt Switch, T-Wave, lol. Poison Jab, Wild Charge, Crunch, Dig to fuck over things like Macargo. Yeah, no, I genuinely think this has potential. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? I don't know what the fuck Game Freak were thinking of, given this thing base 43 speed. Thing is, it's probably the slowest fully evolved electric type in the game. Okay, I don't know why it's probably just changed to Bonsly, but fuck it. I mean, it's about as slow as Bonsly, so that's about fair. Anyway, This thing is Avika Volt, the slowest, fast-looking creature in all of existence. Now, this thing, well, similarly to Charge Bug, actually, it's got some good defensive utility, especially with an immunity to ground thanks to Levitate. But obviously, the only real use for this thing is either an Agility Sweeper or a Spec Set. And that's about all there is to say about it. Yeah, right, moving on. Here, of course, we have Crawdon's evil cousin, Crabominable, the first fighting Ice-type Pokemon. And boy, oh boy, is this thing gonna be sort of meh. It's kind of like an Ice-type Pangoro in Ken's very simple opinion. It's got excellent attack, meh, bulk, and shit speed. Unlike Pangoro, of course, it doesn't really get much of a move pool to make up for that, really. I mean, it's got CC, Ice Hammer, which is a Ice-type Hammer Arm, Scald, Pursuit, EQ, and Power Punch, and that's, and Stone Edge and EQ, of course, which is kind of redundant with fighting ice coverage. So there you go. But then again, this thing is obviously going to be useful in a tier like OU because everything in that tier is weak to ice. The only things that aren't weak to ice are ice types and Volcanion. So this thing is going to be probably very useful there. Unfortunately, it's slow and frail, as mentioned before, and its abilities don't really help it there. They just make it more powerful. Iron Fist is unfortunately not actually that useful. If it got Drain Punch or something, then it'd be fantastic. It does get Ice Punch, of course. But I mean, you gotta run an Ice Hammer, man. That's the way to go. You can even run Avalanche to make use of its shit speed. And of course, I mentioned Scald. That's just because it gets it. And you know, showdown logic. If something gets Scald, it's gonna be carrying Scald, unless it's Ember. Ah, yes, these bird things. They are sort of meh. They've got Xatu type stats really, with a somewhat useful ability in Dancer, which means they copy moves like Swords Dance and Quiver Dance when they're used, so that makes them a sort of a good way of deterring Quiver Dancers, I suppose. But as far as move pool goes, I mean, they're all just special attackers, really. I mean, they've got Air Slash, they've got what is it called? Revelation Dance, 90 base power special move. It says it's normal there, but what happens is the user attacks the target by dancing very hard. That's the worst description for a move I've ever read. It changes type depending on this thing's type. So if it's the fire flying one, it's going to be fire type, and all the other ones is going to be doing whatever their respective typing. And this thing doesn't get set up in Calm Mind. Doesn't really have the speed for that. It gets agility. In fact, looking at this, what you could have is like an Agility, Calm Mind, double dance set with Revelation Dance and Air Slash or Hurricane, but that's about all you can really do. And all of the Oricorio forms are exactly the same. All the same move pool. The only difference between them, of course, is the typing of Revelation Dance, but that's not useful. They also get Swords Dance if you want to make use of that excellent 70 attack stat. They don't get Brave Bird, they get Acrobatics and then like Steel Wing coverage. Although, they do have Baton Pass as well. So, one thing that you could do is you could switch into a dance move and just Baton Pass it out. Lol. So, there's always something to consider. And they also get U-Turn if you want to just run like a Spec set or something. Spec's Hurricane is going to be doing good damage, of course. You could have like Hurricane, Revelation Dance, U-Turn, and Hidden Power. But other than that, they're pretty shit, to be honest. Introducing the game's first fully evolved Bug Fairy typing. It's an interesting typing. It's got quad resistances to fighting, resists ground, resists grass, resists dragon. But it's weak to, flying, fire, rock, poison, steel, which is actually quite a few types, come to think of it. And its abilities are useless. Shield Dust is about the most useful thing it gets, which really says something. So I suppose you can't Scald Burn it, so come to think of it, it's actually not that bad at all. Now, this thing is obviously going to be running a special attacking set, unless you want to be me and run like a banded U-turn return set or something, I don't bloody know. And it does have actually, a move pool to make use of that. It gets Stab Moonblast, which is great. I mean, you have many fairy types that just run like mono like Moonblast or mono Hyper Voice if it's Sylveon sets, just because Fairy Stab is so good. And on top of that, you get Bug, which is resisted by all the same types as Fairy has, so that's completely useless. But if you feel like running it anyway, you could also consider Pollen Puff, which is this thing's new signature move. It's a 90 base power special move, which that's about it. However, if you target an ally with it, then it actually restores their HP instead of doing damage. So that's something. That's about it, really. It gets Psychic to deal with poison types, but it's still completely walled by fire and steel types, so you'd have to run Hidden Power Ground or something. So, Lycanroc Day. This thing is ridiculously speedy, if you notice that it has Sand Rush as well. So you got base 112 speed under Sand Rush, which off the top of my head is what? So 710 speed under the sand. Why? Fuck you, that's why. Unfortunately, although this thing has a good attack stat and it gets Swords Dance to boost it even further, and Rock Polish to boost its speed, it doesn't really have much of a move pool. It does not get EQ, it gets Stone Edge, Brick Break, Crunch, and a new Rock type priority move, because this thing obviously needs priority, called Acceleruck, which is just 40 BP Rock type priority, and that's it. Besides that, it gets some support moves like Stealth Rock and Roar, and more priority in Sucker Punch, for God's sake. But unfortunately, it just doesn't really have the coverage to be that much of a threat in Kent's Praise. But obviously, Stab Stone Edge is always nice. And unfortunately, it's a bit frail, so it died to things like Bullet Punch and Aqua Jet. So it's probably not going to be OU. It's probably going to be a Sand Sweeper a la Stoutland in the lower tiers. Next up we have, of course, Lycanroc Verlis form. Now this thing sacrifices a lot of that excellent speed for HP for some bulk, which goes well with mono rock typing, of course. It loses Sand Rush, which is really annoying, but it does have a slightly better move pool. It gets Counter, which is obviously going to be useful. It gets Bulk Up, which is, again, not very useful. I suppose if you're in the sand with the Spadef boost and your max HP, max Spadef, it does have some use. Though again, you have the same problem of not really having enough coverage. You have Stone Edge and Brick Break. But interestingly, this thing actually has No Guard, so you're not going to be missing Stone Edge. Isn't that fantastic? And besides that, same problems as Lycanroc. It can't really do much. It's even slower than the other Lycanroc form. Can you believe that? But this does get Rock Polish as well. So you could run like Bulk Up Rock Polish, or if you're in the sand, just a especially defensive Bulk Up set, and spam those Stone Edges, and that's about it. And next up, of course, you have Wishiwashi. And looking at those stats, you might think this thing is fucking terrible. It has worse offensive prowess than bloody Magikarp. However, when this thing has a lot of HP, as per its schooling ability, it turns into this abomination with a base stat total of 620, dual 140 offensive stats, and 130 defense, 135 Spadef. Shit HP kind of ruins its defensive, but you can't argue with those offensive stats. This thing is going to be doing damage. However, there are a few problems with this thing. Well, first of all, look at the positives. Obviously, those stats are fucking terrifying. It has some good moves in, Aqua Tail, Waterfall, EQ, U-Turn, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump, and it doesn't get Crunch. I don't know why it doesn't get Crunch. It gets Faint Attack, and that's about it. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, when it has a lot of HP, the Pokemon forms a powerful school. It stops schooling when its HP is low, is what that full explanation says. As far as I can tell, that means that when it goes below half HP, looking at things like Defeatist Archeops, it reverts back into the Piss Weak form you just saw. So, and, Archeops is NU, and it's also got 140 attack. But an Archeops has also got, 112 base speed, and it has a better move pool. So, this thing is really not going to be that much of a threat, unfortunately, because of that shit HP stat ruining its bulk, and because it's going to be moving after everything. It's going to take a hit, go down to half HP, and then it's going to become useless straight away, which is a shame. So this thing is really only useful on Trick Room teams, and even then there are better options than Wishiwashi. So we'll have to see if I'm right about it being half HP like Defeatist. If that's the case, then this thing is going to be pretty low down in the tiers, which is a shame. Anyway, looking at its move pool, Specs or Bandit, there's really not much else. Scarf, if you want to be lousy. Life Orb is not really an option because you've got to conserve HP. I mean, nobody runs a Life Orb. Archeops, for example, Well, then again, you could run Life Orb Archeops because you get Roost, but this doesn't, because it gets Roost, but this doesn't get any recovery besides fucking Aqua Ring. So, I don't really know. It's gonna be useful. It's gonna be useful on Trick Room, otherwise, no, which is a real shame. I like the look of this thing. Merciless. The Pokemon's attacks become critical hits if the target is poisoned. Baneful Bunker. In addition to protecting the user from attacks, this move also poisons any attacker that makes direct contact. Toxic Spikes. Twice. Is it me, or is this Pokemon trying to toxic its opponents? So, hey, say hello to Stall's best new friend, Cunt Tentacruel, basically. Poison water typing, which is very, very good. Access to every single move that can inflict poison in the game, except for Twin Needle. Access to Recover, and access to Regenerator, with very good bulk. On the physical side, it's about as bulky as Intimidate, while on the specially defensive side, it's a lot bulkier. This thing is going to be an absolute pain in the ass. Jesus Christ. I mean, it is slow as shit. The HP is not that great, which kind of undermines its bulk. But that's not really going to matter now, is it? That's just not going to matter. This thing's utility, this thing's longevity with Recover and Regenerator means it's going to be very, very viable. I think it's going to be up there in UU. Not quite OU because of the ground weakness and the fact that, like I said, it doesn't have that great offensive presence. That will come onto an offensive set in a second. I think what people are going to be running on this thing is going to be just Baneful Bunker, T-Spikes possibly, Scold, and Venoshock with Generator. That's probably all there is to it. But I think that we could also try a physically offensive set with Life Orb. 63 attack is not that great, but it is better than 53 attack. Though, of course, you could run a specially offensive set. I prefer slightly more power, really. But then again, it depends. So, if you want to run a physically offensive set, you've got Poison Jab with this 30% chance to poison, Merciless, which makes every single attack on a poison Pokemon a crit, which is obviously going to be a huge boost to its power. So if you have Life Orb, Merciless, Poison Jab, and Liquidation, which is a new water type move, which will come up in just a second. Here we are. The user slams into the target using a full force blast of water. This may also lower the target's defense stat. Now, I don't know what percentage chance it has to lower the defense stat, but that's pretty good anyway. So, with your physically offensive Toxapex set, you could have Liquidation, Poison Jab. Then the other two moves are basically fill up, seeing as it's 2 stabs alone have pretty good coverage. You could have Baneful Bunker to guarantee a poison and then crit them the next turn. And Recover to stay alive, seeing as you're going to be running Merciless over Regenerator. Or you could run a specially offensive set with, again, I think, Merciless with Baneful Bunker and Recover. But, well, in that case, you might not necessarily need Baneful Bunker. You could run Sludge Bomb. But then it gets a little bit more difficult if you want to run a specially offensive set. Because if you want to run Ice Beam, say, then that kind of eats into your coverage. And you can't run Scold because that has terrible synergy with Merciless. People are going to be running it anyway, I should think. But Merciless plus Scold is obviously terrible synergy. What you could do to make use of Merciless is you could have Baneful Bunker, you could have Venoshock, Recover, and Surf again. You don't really have room for moves like Ice Beam, then again, you don't really need it. Because this thing has pretty good coverage, like I said, with its stabs alone. So, in summary, this thing is a complete cunt. Look forward to it in synergy with things like Ferrocy, things like Cresselia. This thing will not ever die.